All right, everyone, welcome back to AVR120. This will be session 4, and we will be going predominantly over loops. So, a loop is a block of code that runs multiple times, and it runs until conditions are false and then continues on with the program, generally. Um, so, loops are like kind of the building blocks of programming, more or less. Every game has a fundamental game loop. Every program has a program loop that like is kind of the engine underneath it that drives everything and will eventually allow you to go to every different piece of the program. So essentially, one of the basic building blocks of programming in general is just reusing code many, many times and selecting things based on those on conditions. So the first loop we'll talk about is a while loop. So a while loop is uses the while keyword and then it has a condition after it. And while that uh, condition is true, it'll run these statements. So you'll see with the flow diagram here, main program goes to condition. If the condition is true, it runs that code block and it keeps rerunning it, okay, until it's not true. So until the condition is just false. And then it will continue on with execution of the program. So this is kind of what that looks like, okay? So while condition is true here, okay? While player health is greater than or equal to 0, okay? We can do something like write the value of the player's health. We can print that to screen, and then maybe we'll subtract 10. And then just keep doing that until the player has no more health, and the condition will no longer be true, and it will break out of the loop, okay? So we'll go ahead and kind of use that initial loop in our kind of choose your own adventure game here. So in the forest section, we're actually going to put the while loop there. So we can say, actually, maybe for readability purposes, we'll go ahead and we'll do this. So um, we'll go ahead and say if location choice, all right, and then remember this is the comparison operator, so we're checking location choice and we're saying if it's equal to forest, okay, all right, and then we're going to nest a while loop inside of this. So nesting is putting another statement inside of um, other statements. So we have our if statement here, but we're going to nest or put inside of our if statement a loop. So we'll say while player health, okay, is greater than 0, um, and actually I'm just going to do greater than, um, because we don't, even when the player's health is equal to 0, we want them to be kind of dead, right? So um, we'll say console dot write line, and we'll say the value of player's health is, and then you're going to take some of these are the like kind of curly braces, the same braces that we have here, and this is called substitution. This is another way. I'm just going to kind of show you some tricks while we go along. It's another way to basically print. So let me explain this. So before, we would take the variable, right? We'd print off whatever's in that variable, and we would concatenate it or kind of add it together with some of this text we've written out in the quotation marks, and then maybe print off a number or another value, right? So, but what we can do down here, okay, is what's called substitution, which is essentially what if we have these curly braces and then we put the kind of zero element, the zero number or element in here, it will basically reference this zero as the first variable in this list after the quotation, the text in the quotation marks. So the structure is basically the text in the quotation mark, comma, and then the player health variable, and it will take basically player health and put it in zero. Okay. If we had another variable, okay, so let's say we do something like we make a float variable and we call it at the top here, we call player gold, and we set it equal to like 5.5. And what you'll notice too is we're getting an error because with a float, you need to put an F at the end of it to indicate that it's a float. So you have your data type float. This is how you write a float. We'll go back down here and we will actually also print off the player's gold value. So we'll say the value of player's health is 0. I'll do one of those line break characters, okay? And then I'll say uh, value of player's gold is, and then I will do the curly braces again here and I'll put 1. And then now we can put a comma here and we can print out player's gold. And so now what this is going to print is it's going to say the value of the player's health is whatever the value of the player's health variable is. All right, it's going to break the line. Then the next line, it's going to go value of player's gold is whatever the value 1, which is the next variable in the list of variables on the right here, which will be player's gold. So it'll print player's gold here. Okay, um, and then what we can do is we can subtract the player health, okay, minus minus just like that. So that's decrementing again, remember. And we will decrement every loop, okay? So we'll decrement the player's health every loop, and until it basically will eventually become less than 0, and then it'll break out of the loop, and then the program will end. Yeah, I'm going to go put console.readline here. Actually, I don't think you need it. I think it should pause it after each one. But if it doesn't, we may need to put console.readline there. So, okay, so then now, if we kind of save everything, and we run this again, okay, so go ahead and go to the top of the program, prompts us for our name. Would you like to begin your adventure? So now we're here, right? Adventure start. We'll say yes. Your adventure begins now. Okay, runs that text. Prints the my player's health. I'm thinking good spot thoughts. My theory is lifted. It's going to increment by 1, add 1 to the health. Then it's going to subtract 1 from the health with this decrement statement there. Then it's going to add 5. Okay. Then we're going to subtract 40 and from the player health variable. And that's going to put us in this section of the else if statement. All right, and then we will prompt the user for this section. So we'll say you're presented with 3 paths, one which leads to an anonymous forest, another one's a volcanic mountain, and another one descends into a dark cave. Which path will you choose? Please type forest, mountain, or cave, right? So we will then go ahead and type in forest, okay? And it will print this text off. You'll see that it prints this text off in the case, okay? It waits for our for console.readline, and then it breaks out of that statement. So we're going to do that now. We'll press enter, do that now. And Yeah. Sorry, I made a mistake here. So, we do need the console.readline at the end of this, or after each loop, so that we prompt the user to press enter and it doesn't just run everything and then disappear off screen very quickly. So I'm just going to get back to where we were. And we'll see now that we go into the loop. So if location equals forest, which is what we typed, right? Um, it's basically going to print off the value of player health and player gold. And then if we keep pressing enter, it subtracts 1. And it will do this for a really long time until basically player's health gets to 0, and then the program will end because there's no more code after this. We could also do something like this, make it a little bit quicker. So we could do minus equals, let's just do 5, right? And then that way we don't have to go through a million times or 25 times exactly for the loop. Something to bear in mind here. Um, so again, the structure of a while loop is the while keyword, and then the condition that is evaluated at the end of each loop. And then when it's false, it breaks out of the loop. So as long as this is true, it'll run this, and then when it's false, it'll break out of it. You can have what's called an infinite loop, and that's really dangerous with while loops because that will just infinitely loop in your program, and then it will um, essentially crash the program because there's no way to stop it. So what that happens, the way that happens is that this condition is always evaluates to true. So you need to just make sure when you have this condition, particularly in a while loop, that the condition will eventually evaluate to false. Okay, just in general. I could show you an example of a while loop. Let's say I just didn't put the greater than 0. I just put in player health. Okay. We'll go ahead and we'll actually, it won't even let us. It gives me an error. Let's see. Oh yeah, see, it's saying here cannot implicitly convert from type into bool. So it's literally this statement needs to be a true or false statement inside of the parentheses here, and because it's literally just a number, um, yeah. So we'll have to make it like a true false statement. So I'll just do something like yeah, so this will basically say like if player health is equal to 25, run this, run the code in here, which will infinitely run because it's always going to be 25 when it gets to this point. It will never not be 25. Um, uh, oh, we have to get rid of this line though. And you don't have to copy this. I'm just showing this as an example of basically an infinite loop. So this will just literally run infinitely, and because we're equating it, the player health to 25, it'll always be 25. We're not subtracting anything from it after each loop, so it's just going to run like infinitely. So we'll go ahead and get to that part of the program here. Yes, measure begins now. Um, we'll say forest again. All right. All that text gets printed. It subtracts, but it doesn't subtract anything, right? So it just runs infinitely. Okay. There's no way for me to get out of that. I could do this a million times, and it would never let me out of this loop. Okay. And essentially, I've kind of more or less bricked the program because there's no way for me to get out of the program. This is just an infinite loop. So I'm just going to Control Z all that. Control Z is a really, if you don't know about it, it's very useful. It's the undo command. Another really useful command is Control Y, which is the opposite. It's redo. Doesn't look like it's working very well here, but Control Y will redo um, any text you may have deleted or changed. Okay, so that is an example of a while loop. So let's kind of continue onward here. a for loop. So a for loop is it's a little. This is probably the most confusing loop, um, but essentially, the structure of a for loop is that you'll have this for keyword here. You'll have what's called an initializer variable, or a variable that you're initializing to, like, generally it's 0. Um, so that's the first part of the statement. The second part is the condition that you're checking. So as long as that condition is true, it'll run the code, okay, and then it will increment the this variable. This is basically a counter variable. It keeps track of the amount of times the loop has run, and it will increment it +1, essentially until you set it up to where, like, the condition um, is true, um, and then it will break out of the loop. I know I'm kind of doing a rough job explaining it. I'm gonna show it to you, and I think it'll make more sense when I show it to you. But basically, just know that you have this kind of counter variable. You have this condition that you're going to use the counter variable in, that this is going to be checked, and then it's going to increment that variable. So again, structure is similar to the other loops. Main program, you run your initializer, it checks the condition. If the condition is true, it runs the code block, and increments the initializer variable, or I call it counter variable sometimes, but it's this variable here, and then increments that. Then it kind of reruns and checks the condition. Keep doing this and doing this and doing this until it's false, and then it continues on with the program there. Okay, so I have an example on the next page of one way to do a for loop, but I'm going to show you a different way, like a more kind of traditional way to do it. So we'll go ahead and do this down here. We can put it in more in our if statement here. So we'll say else if location choice is equal to mountain. We'll go ahead and make a loop here. So we'll say something like console.writeLine, and we'll say you know what? I'm sorry. Let me delete all this here. We'll do the for loop. So the for I, int I equals 0. So that's the initializer statement. Okay, where we set the then the counter variable to 0. I less than 5. Sorry. You know what? It's greater than 5. I, I plus plus. And so what this is saying is that we're using the for keyword. We're initializing this counter variable I to 0, okay? And this will keep track of where we are in the loop. As if I is, and I'm sorry, I messed this up again. It's actually if I is less than 5, okay. So if I doesn't equal 5, uh, we're going to run the code in the curly braces down here, and then we're going to add one increment I plus 1. Okay, we're going to do that 5 times, and then actually we'll do it 4 times. On the 5th time, it should go ahead and break out of the loop. So we'll say something to the effect of the ring invigorates you. And then we will say we'll print off player health. We'll print off the player health. Excuse me. We'll go ahead and delete this. We're going to say we're going to increment player health plus. We'll do the plus equals 1. So that's going to add 1 to the player health every time it goes through the loop. Then we'll go ahead and we will print that off. So the player's new health value is, and then we'll print off player health. And then I also just wanted to show you guys, this is kind of not part of the game, I guess, but we're just gonna write it anyways. How you would keep track of where you are in the loop, okay? We can actually print off the value of I. So we can say we are currently in loop, and we can print off I here like that, and we can save it, and that will tell us what number we are in the loop. So we'll go ahead, and this is for the mountain case, so we got to get back there in the code. My name, yes. Okay, we'll go ahead, my health is waning. Presented with 3 paths. This time we'll choose mountain. Okay, and we do the text in the mountain case. And of course, I forgot to put console.readline again. So let me go ahead and do that now. Sorry about that. We'll go ahead and run it. Right, so I didn't type in Y there. That's why that text printed off. Okay, and then we'll do mountain. And you can see here, the ring invigorates you. The player's new health value is 26. We are currently in loop 0. Okay, so this is the first iteration of the loop. Currently in loop 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on the 5th one, right, because I has to be less than 5, it breaks out of the program. It ends the program because there's no code after this here. We can just, we don't really need this anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that multi-line comment. There's no more code here, so it just breaks out of the program there. Okay, so that is a for loop. It is a little can be a little confusing, but the big things to take away are this is the counter variable. It keeps track of where you are in the loop. You need a condition that's based on that counter variable. So if I is less, so you just need to basically run a check on the value of I. If I hits a certain value, that's when you end the loop, right? So if it hits above 5, we could make it 3, right? We could make this 3, and it would run the loop 3 times, then end, 2 times, then end, and then we just increment I. This is saying that it's going to increment that counter variable once after each loop, okay? So pretty useful. Syntax is definitely a little confusing, or the way the code looks. But it's almost essentially it's 3 statements, right? Because you have a semicolon here, so it's like 3 separate statements kind of put into one statement here that's checked. So if you have questions about this, like feel free to email me. I know it's a little confusing, but it's definitely extremely useful to understand the for loop. Okay, so this is another example here. Um, uh, this uses kind of some values I created. I would honestly go with use the for loop that I had presented just earlier in the video here. It's a little bit clearer what's happening with the loop. Okay, so do while loop. So this is a bit different than the loops we have before. Um, it is similar to the while loop, but essentially the difference between this loop is it's going to do the first code in this statement here after the do keyword and in the first set of curly braces. And it's going to do that code while the condition is true. So it will always, one thing to note about this, it will always run the code in this code block first. It'll always run the code once. Whatever's in this set of curly braces, it'll run that code once, always. And then it will check the condition. So this is useful like for when you want to check the code once, or run the code in here once, okay, and then start evaluating the condition and looping if the condition is true. So again, main program runs the code block immediately. You can see how that's the difference between a lot of the other ones. Runs the code block immediately, then checks the condition. If the condition is true, runs the code block again, keeps looping this until it's not true anymore. If the condition is false, then it will then go back to the main program. Okay. So this is an example of the do while loop. Here, we'll go ahead and write this out in code using the same kind of structure where we'll do location choice and we'll set that equal to cave. And we'll do the do while loop. So do some code. We can set up like some code to run here. Excuse me. So we'll do um, we can say something like it's very dark in here, and or you know what? I'm sorry. I wrote there's a dragon in here and it eats us, which is not good. So again, we'll just kind of maybe subtract the player's health here. So we'll say player health minus equals, we'll do 5 again, something like that. And we will say, we can also say maybe like player gold minus equals 1 as well, right? Um, and then we'll say console.writeLine. We're dragging attacks the player for attacks the player. His health is, and then we can write player health, print player health. And then we can also write the dragon takes your adventuring money. And we can say, your gold value is, and we can print the player gold. And we can say, while the player health, okay, is greater than 0, Okay, so the do will run the code in here. It'll subtract the player health by 5. It'll subtract the player gold by 5. It will then print, the dragon is attacks the player. His health is player health. Dragon takes your adventuring money. Your player gold is 1. It will run this for sure once. It'll run this entire set of code once here, okay? So then it will check the while loop, and as long as the player's health is greater than 0, it will run here. So um, let's run this back here. Let me just double check and make sure I saved. Run. All right, start the adventure. Boom, boom, boom. I'll say cave. I'm sorry, I literally do the same thing I keep forgetting to do, which is console.readline to pause the execution so we can see it print on screen there. All right, so Richard, yes. Cave. All right, so then you decided to send in the cave. What's the worst that could happen, you think? It turns out the worst that could happen is eaten by a dragon, which happens. Ouch. The dragon attacks the player, health is 20. Dragon takes your adventuring money. Your gold value is 4.5, all right? So it runs this code immediately, all right? Then checks the value, okay? Player's health is still above 20, so it runs it again. 15, 10, 5, 0, then it breaks out, right? So we can actually test this theory too. That it just just I can show you that it runs this code. And it'll and the program will end because this condition will evaluate to false. So we'll go ahead and we'll run this now to prove that point. I'll say yes, and we'll go to the cave again. All right, so we'll see. We see that it runs this is the text from the switch statement. This is the text from the inside of the do loop here, runs that once, and it ends the program, right? Because this evaluates to false immediately. So basically, I've showed you kind of 3 different types of loops here. And I wanted to just briefly touch on now when you would use each type of loop, and then we'll end this video here. So you want to use a while loop when you just want to run the code until the condition is no longer true. Okay, so very basically just just to check that condition after each loop, and then when it evaluates the false to get out of it. Do while is when you want to run the code at least once, regardless if the condition is true or not. Okay, so again, remember we ran that first section of the do code, even though the condition was false immediately. And the for loop is when you want to run the code a specific number of times, and you can use that I variable, right? You can set it equal to 0, and then you can run that can check its condition, or check the number of loops. So let me go back to that really quick because I'm not doing a great job putting it into words. So you have your the I variable, the counter, right? And we can control the number of loops because we're saying, okay, as long as I is less than 5, okay, we want to run this code 5 times, and then we want to add 1, and it'll do this until I eventually becomes greater than 5, and then it will no longer need to run this code. So in that way, we can control the number of times these blocks of code run. In the sense that we can control we can set the number here, versus these ones we're just checking a variable, or just checking this condition here, these conditions here. All right, so I know that's probably a lot. Thanks for sticking with me. Appreciate it, and we will see you on the next video. Next week, we're going to go more into methods, and then eventually classes as well. And then we will move on to some Unity projects. So thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.